Back in the garage today, back in the garage today. What's going on, guys? Back in the garage today where I'm going to be doing some upgrades to my 2016 KTM 1290 Super Adventure. Specifically, I'm going to update my old Garmin 590 LM GPS to the new Garmin Zumo XT GPS. Totally different mount, got to run new wiring, all that fun stuff, so let's get to work. Alright, so before we get started on the removal of the old wiring harness and mount and everything, I am using the SW Motec mount on mine. We're going to reuse that. It's just we need a different base plate and wiring harness for the new XT GPS. So not all of you guys are going to have this on your bike. This is for the aftermarket KTM Power Parts tank bag. I need to remove this ring, and then I'm going to pull the seat and the tank cover off, so it'll allow me to get access to these other panels. These are all Torx bits, while these up here are Allens. Okay, so next up, using a T27 bit, we've got this screw back here. We also have two on this side. We have two on the other side as well. And we're gonna get these pulled. Alright, so on both sides of the bike, so we don't have to take off the tank and everything else. In fact, we're not even going to totally remove the plastics. We're going to take this fairing sort of off. We're going to pull it off part of the way. We've got a fastener here. We've got a couple fasteners down here, which I'll show you. And then we also need to remove this piece that the turn signal's on. So we've got a fastener here, one right inside here, and one right up here. I'll show you all those. That will allow us... And then we've got one more hidden back here. That'll allow us to get everything moved out of place so we can get this headlight assembly off. That way we can get into our wiring. So to start with, we're going to remove this screw right here. Keep in mind, we're going to have to do this on both sides of the motorcycle. I'm just going to show you on this side. Okay, also as part of this fairing, we have this screw up here, also a T27. And then, hopefully, you can see it right there. Whoops, get my camera over into place. We have another T27 there, so we've got those two to remove next. Alright, so with those fasteners removed, we should be able to slide this just out of the way, and that's all we really need to do for right now. While we're here, we're going to go ahead and remove this fastener. There's another one right inside here, which I'll show you, and there should be one right here as well. Take the first one out. The next one is right here. And the last one we need to get to on this piece is sitting right here, again, a T27. So with all those fasteners removed, the last thing we need to get to is this 8mm right here. I'm just going to use a ratchet. That's attaching this side mask piece to the tank cover. Once we get that undone, we'll be able to pop this piece off. So with the 8mm bolt out, we should be able to work this piece loose. Just be careful, it does have some plastic tabs on the back. And that's really all we need. We just need it out of the way. That's going to allow us access points to get this headlight mask off and start to get into our wiring harness. One other thing I just remembered, we also need to remove the windscreen and then the mounting bracket here in just a moment. Again, T27 bit. Alright, with the windscreen removed, we now need to remove this bracket, two T27s on each side. Alright, so we're down to our last 4 screws, I believe. We got one here, and then we've got one that sits back in here. I think you can get an 8mm on them, but I'm just going to use the T27 bit and get these removed on each side. Alright, with the bolts removed on each side, we should just be able to pull out the headlight mask. There we go. Now we can get into our wiring harness. Now everybody's is going to look a little different inside. I've got some aftermarket headlights hooked up in here. This is my wiring harness for my GPS. You can see I've got mine marked on CC2, which is the accessory wire. All of this wiring right here is for my my old GPS. So I'm going to get out some cutters to cut some of these zip ties loose. we'll get these plugs unhooked, and then we'll start to fish this wiring out. All right, you can see I've got my wiring all pulled out. Ridiculous on this thing. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse this SW Motec mount. So I'm going to pull this apart because you can see how this is mounted on here. I got to pull this old mounting bracket off of here since we're not going to reuse that for the new GPS. Now, because I did have my wiring harness running behind the gauges, I had to pull out these 3 screws. They're just a T25 bit, and that allowed me to get everything pulled off of there. So included with the new GPS is the new style mount, which is much, much smaller. We also have this much smaller wiring harness. This is the mounting hardware. And then they also include a bunch of different RAM mount options. Now, in our case, I'm using the SW Motec mount, so I'm really only going to need this bag in order to mount this new GPS mount to the SW Motec mount. Alright, so before I can start to mount this to my SW Motec mount, first thing you want to do is get out your wiring harness and push this cable. It's a little snug, and pull it through there. And then you want to get it lined up, and on the back side there's a little screw hole there. They did give you the fastener. We're going to fix that on, because once we have this mounted to the plate, we're no longer going to be able to access it. Okay, so there it is with the screw installed. So now this cable's affixed. Your screw is going to look different. They didn't include one in my pack, so I had to run to the hardware store and make something work. So now what we're going to do is get this base plate on here. Now before we do that, we need to take the rest of this mounting hardware, and you can see I've already put one of these in here. You got 4. This is your little brass bushing, or little metal bushing piece. That's going to go on the back side. Then you will have your screw with your washer. That will go through here. That will affix to whatever mounting bracket you're using, and then a nut will go on the back of it. So I'm going to get to work on that. Okay, we can see we got my mounting plate on here. Everything's tightened down where it needs to be. And then, you know, with this new setup, it does have this little rubber boot that'll clamp down over there to protect it from weather. In any event, next thing we need to do is get this back on the bike and get this wiring ran so we can get it connected. Now, Garmin did include a couple of wire connectors here. We're not going to use these though. We're going to use a little bit different style. We're going to use a blade style since KTM already has that on the bike. So let me show you what that looks like. I went ahead and stripped the wire back a little bit further and put these blade style connectors on. This way it'll fit right into your factory connectors that are already on the bike, and the little piece of insulation will slide down over. It works real nice this way. You can pick these up at Harbor Freight, Lowe's, any sort of hardware store. I've got a whole kit of them from Harbor Freight that comes with a bunch of different connections, probably like $5-6. I'll try to link them down in the description below. All right, you can see I've got the mount on here now. Here's the little rubber cover. Just make sure it stays up top there somewhere so you can access it. In any event, nothing's done yet. It's just kind of bugged up. I've got the cable running back through. I did put went ahead and screwed the gauges back down. I've got it running down in here. And then I've got it coming out through the headlight area here. Here are my connectors. Now you have the choice. You can hop on to accessory 1 or accessory 2. Accessory 2 is going to be it's only going to be on when the switch is on. Accessory 1 is going to be hot all the time. Your ground wire, which is your black wire from Garmin, is going to plug into the brown cable, and then the red cable is going to be your hot wire. Now, one thing I would suggest doing, put some dielectric grease on the little blade tabs before you insert them. That'll just keep water and corrosion and stuff from getting in there. I mean, they do have these little rubber boots, which is nice, but it's just added protection. I'm just gonna go ahead and plug those in, and then I'm gonna put the GPS on. I wanna test, make sure the wiring and everything works first before we go into final adjustments and fit and finish. Okay, so with the GPS mounted, we're gonna kick the switch on. With any luck, it should power right up. And there we have it. So we know our wiring's good. We know we've got it on the accessory wire, which in my case is what I want. If you did it for constant on, then as soon as you put the GPS on here, it should have powered right up. So got that done. Now it's time to go clean some stuff up on the inside to make it look a little cleaner. Okay, so nothing too crazy. Got a few zip ties on here to bunch this up. Now, I do want to show you something I did here. Is I have this ran down. I did put a zip tie right here, and that's just to keep this kind of taut. Also, I wanted to keep this wire here taut. So what I did is I pulled it up in here, and then I've got, let me see if I can get you guys lighten that up a little bit. That light's probably not helping. So I pulled that cable up through here, and then I zip tied it to some cables back here just to keep this cable that's running down the outside kind of tight because I don't want it flapping around. Now, at least in the case of the way my mount is, I'm gonna go ahead and make my adjustments now before I put that headlight mask back on because it makes it a little bit more difficult to access. Once I get this the way I want it mounted, like orientation wise, angle wise, that sort of thing, then we'll go to putting the headlight back on. So with the GPS how I want it, now it's just make sure all this wiring tucks back in. You may have to play around with it for a little bit and then get the 4 bolts back in on the headlight. Okay, so with the headlight and the windshield back on, everything else is just gonna be reverse order of what we did. So I'm gonna do that real quick and then we'll come back and wrap up. All right, and with about 10 minutes of work, the bike is all back together with the GPS installed. So anyway guys, that is how you install one of the new Garmin Zumo XTs on at least a 2016, 15, 17 KTM 1290 Super Adventure. It's gonna be a little bit different depending on the type of mount you're using. Are you gonna use one of the enclosed ram mounts? Or are you going to use one of these SW Motecs? Do you have an R model? Do you have something a little bit different? The wiring's going to be the ssame though, and hopefully that at least gave you some ideas. Only downside for me is I got to wire up my 992 so I can flip-flop back and forth, so I need another wiring harness and another mount. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider hitting that subscribe button because if you like motorcycles, this is the place to be. If you have any questions about anything I went over today, or the unit in general, I am going to make a review video on the GPS once I've had a few weeks to go out and use it. But, you know, you can let me know down in the comment section if that video is out. I'm going to link it up here. And as always, I'll talk to you again soon.